And we are a culture obsessed with commitment. We say it all the time. I'm committed to this goal. I'm committed to this project. I'm committing to change. But if we stop and look closer, most people aren't actually committing to the right thing. They're committing to an outcome, a number, a target weight, a job title, a bank account figure. They're committing to something that lives on the outside. And it's because of that most people quit. Or worse, they succeed but still feel lost. Let me offer a new thought. Don't commit to a result. Commit to a reason. Don't commit to doing something. Commit to becoming someone. The truth is, change, real, lasting change, doesn't begin by asking, what do I want to achieve? It begins by asking, who do I want to be? It's not about building a routine to fit into your day. It's about building an identity you can grow into for life. For 90 days, what if you didn't wake up chasing goals, but rather aligning with a purpose? A reason that makes the discomfort worth it. A reason that pulls you forward when motivation isn't enough. That's what commitment should be. Not a chore, not a checkbox, but a calling. We've made commitment transactional. We commit if there's a payoff, if it looks good on social media, if it makes us feel productive. But those aren't real commitments. They're negotiations. The minute the reward dries up, so does our drive. The minute it gets hard, inconvenient, or invisible to others, we step back. But true commitment, the kind that rewires your mind, redefines your path, and reshapes your future, that kind of commitment doesn't come from a place of pressure. It comes from a place of clarity. It doesn't come from fear. It comes from meaning. Think about it. We stay consistent with the things that are deeply connected to who we believe we are. If someone believes they are an athlete, they don't have to debate whether they'll train today. They just do, because it's part of their identity. If someone sees themselves as a leader, they don't need to be reminded to show up early or own their mistakes. It's who they are. That's why 90 days isn't just about what you're doing, it's about what you're declaring. Every action you take is casting a vote for the kind of person you are becoming. And that means the most powerful thing you can commit to is a vision of yourself that's worth fighting for. Ask yourself, what would happen if I committed not to perfection, but to progress? What if I committed to showing up, even when it's messy? What if I stopped trying to impress and started trying to align with a kind of life that actually means something to me? Most people don't follow through because their commitment was built on sand, on surface-level desires. They want to get fit, but not because they value health. They want to look good for summer. They want to work harder, not because they believe in their mission, but because they're afraid of falling behind. They're chasing something external, and when they catch it, they realize it was never enough. So here's the shift. Instead of asking, what do I want to achieve in 90 days? Ask, what truth do I want to live in 90 days from now? That's where it starts. That's where everything begins to change. When you get crystal clear on your why. Not a vague motivational poster why. Not a hashtag. A real why. The kind that makes you emotional. The kind that keeps you up at night. Or gets you up in the morning. The kind that feels deeply personal, even if no one else understands it. When your commitment is rooted in that kind of why, you don't need willpower. You need alignment. You don't need to hype yourself up every day. You need to remember who you are. That's what I want you to do for the next 90 days. Don't commit to a task list. Commit to a cause. Commit to an identity. Commit to becoming the kind of person who does the things you used to talk about. Let me be clear. You will have days when you don't feel like it. That's part of it. But when your commitment is rooted in purpose, discipline doesn't feel like punishment. It feels like loyalty. Not to the goal, to yourself. You don't have to feel good every day. You don't even have to succeed every day. You just have to remember what you're standing for. Because on the other side of that consistency, that imperfect, honest, relentless commitment is transformation. Not because the world around you changes, but because you do. And here's what's beautiful about this kind of commitment. It compounds every day. You're reinforcing your identity. Every day you're proving to yourself that you can be trusted. Every day you're becoming someone worth believing in. Someone who doesn't just set goals but lives them. That's why the 90 days matter. Not because the number is magic, but because the process is sacred. You're training your brain to value follow through over feeling. You're rewriting the story you've been telling yourself for years. You're learning how to live in integrity, not perfection, but honesty. And if you do that, if you show up even when it's inconvenient, you'll look up 90 days from now and realize something deeper has shifted. It's not just what you're doing, it's how you see yourself, it's how you carry yourself, it's how you treat your future. So the question isn't, can I commit for 90 days? The question is, can I commit to the version of me that's been waiting to come alive? Because if you make that decision not once, but every day, you won't just change for a season, you'll change forever. We often imagine that big change starts with big moves, that it takes a radical shift, a dramatic decision, or a breakthrough moment to become someone new. But the truth is, transformation is rarely loud. It begins quietly, subtly, with something so small, most people would dismiss it as irrelevant. But that's exactly why it works. The secret to lasting change is this: build one tiny habit that honors your future self. Not 10 habits, not an overhaul of your entire routine, just one. Because when you start small, truly small, you remove the friction that normally stops people from following through. You take away the pressure to be perfect. And you open the door to consistency, which is the foundation of growth. Let me ask you this. If I followed you around for the next 90 days, and I only saw one thing you did every day, what would that one thing tell me about who you are becoming? That's the power of a habit. It's not just about action, it's about identity. The smallest repeated behavior becomes a declaration, a quiet, repeated, this is who I am now. Even if it's as simple as drinking a glass of water first thing in the morning, writing down one sentence of gratitude, reading one page of a book, moving your body for 5 minutes. It may not feel like much, but that's the point. Change isn't about how much effort you put in on day one. It's about how deeply that effort shapes you by day 90. We live in a culture obsessed with optimization. People want the best strategy, the most efficient morning routine, the highest leverage tool. But change doesn't begin with optimization. It begins with ownership. And ownership starts with a habit that you can't talk yourself out of. A habit that's so simple, so doable, that your brain has no excuse left. Most people try to leap before they learn how to walk consistently. They try to run a marathon in their heads without taking one real step on the ground. But change is not about intensity, it's about integrity. Can you do something, anything, that aligns with your future every day without fail? And can you do it even when it feels pointless? That's where the transformation hides, in the boring, unremarkable repetitions that slowly but surely shape a new reality. Most people give up because they don't feel different right away. They don't see the change. But if they understood what was actually happening beneath the surface, they'd never stop. Because each repetition of a tiny habit does something powerful. It teaches your brain that your future matters. It teaches you that you are capable of follow-through. And over time, it shifts the way you see yourself. You go from someone who tries to someone who shows up. From someone who talks about change to someone who embodies it. Here's the truth that few people talk about. Discipline is not built in heroic moments. It's built in the decision to keep your word to yourself when no one is watching, when it's not exciting, and when it seems like it doesn't matter. Because those moments add up. They become a thread that weaves itself into your identity. That's why the size of the habit isn't the point. The scale doesn't matter, the signal does. Does this habit signal to your brain that your life is moving in a direction that matters? That you care enough to show up for yourself, even in a small way? That's why I say, honor your future self. Your future self isn't some distant stranger. It's you. Tomorrow. It's you next week, next month, next year. And every action you take is either a deposit into their strength or a withdrawal from their momentum. Every habit you build, no matter how small, is a way of saying, I've got your back. I'm not abandoning you. That changes everything. Because when your habits are born from that place, not guilt, not shame, not hype, but respect. They become sustainable. They don't require constant motivation. They flow from a deeper sense of self-trust. And self-trust is what creates confidence, not external praise, not hitting arbitrary goals. Confidence is knowing that you will show up for what matters, even when it's inconvenient. So let me ask you again, what's one small thing you could do every day for 90 days that would serve your future? Don't pick something flashy, pick something true. Pick something that feels like a promise to who you want to become. Something that reminds you every day that you are in motion, even if the progress is invisible to others. We often want to change our whole lives in a week, but the people who actually transform, the ones who don't just look different on the outside, but are different on the inside, they understand this one truth. Tiny actions, repeated with intention, will take you further than any burst of intensity ever could. Because what you do daily becomes what you believe permanently. And belief is what shapes your choices, your character, and eventually your destiny. So commit to one habit. Protect it. Honor it. Don't break the chain. If you miss a day, get back up. This isn't about streaks. It's about stewardship of your life, your time, your energy, your potential. It doesn't need to feel big. It needs to feel honest. Something you can look at and say, this is my stake in the ground. This is me choosing growth over comfort. This is me showing up for a life I haven't lived yet, but believe is possible. And if you do that, if you choose just one habit and give it your full presence for 90 days, you will change. Maybe not in the way you expect, but in a way that's real, in a way that lasts. Not because the habit is magical, but because you are. And that small, quiet, daily decision will remind you of that. Every single day is a story we all carry, often silently. It's not the one we tell at dinner parties or post on social media. It's the one that whispers when no one's around. It sounds like, I'm not good enough, or I always mess things up, or I'll never be the kind of person who succeeds. And here's the hard truth. Most of us don't need a new strategy. We need to stop believing the lie we've been living. Because no matter how many habits we build or goals we chase, if we don't confront the inner narrative driving our behavior, we'll find a way to sabotage the progress. You can't outwork a story that says you're broken. You can't outperform a belief that says you're not worthy. So if you want to commit to something that will change your life in 90 days, start here. Remove one lie you've been telling yourself. It sounds simple, but it may be the hardest thing you do because we don't always know it's a lie, not at first. We've repeated it so many times, we've started calling it truth. We've folded it into our identity, and we've collected evidence to support it, often unconsciously. That's what the mind does. It looks for confirmation of what it already believes. But here's the good news. If we can learn to tell ourselves a lie, we can learn to replace it with truth. And the moment you challenge a false belief, you create space for a new possibility to emerge. That's not just personal development. That's freedom. I've seen it over and over. The person who says, I'm terrible with money, continues to make decisions that prove it. The person who believes, I'll never be fit, keeps reinforcing that belief every time they skip a workout, even though they deeply want change. Not because they're lazy, not because they lack potential, but because deep down they don't believe another story is possible. And until that belief shifts, nothing else sticks. This is why surface level change doesn't last. You can force new behaviors for a while. You can discipline your way into a new routine. But if the root belief stays the same, you will eventually return to the old patterns, not because you're weak, but because your behavior will always try to match your identity. So let's make this practical. What's one belief you're carrying that's no longer serving the person you want to become? Maybe it's, I'm just not a disciplined person. Or I always quit when it gets hard. Or people like me don't get those kinds of opportunities. Whatever it is, bring it into the light. Speak it out loud. Write it down. Own the fact that it exists. Not to shame yourself, but to see it clearly. Because once you name the lie, you take away its power. As long as it stays in the shadows, it drives your decisions. But the moment it's exposed, you can examine it, you can challenge it, you can replace it. Now, this isn't about reciting empty affirmations in the mirror. This is about evidence. If the lie was built through repeated emotional experiences, the truth must be built the same way, through small, consistent actions that reinforce a new narrative. For example, if you've been telling yourself, I always mess things up, your new belief isn't just, I'm capable. That's too abstract. The new belief becomes real when you show up, even when you're afraid, when you take a step, even if it's imperfect, when you keep your word, even when no one's watching. And each of those moments becomes a brick in the foundation of a new identity. And slowly, day by day, the new belief begins to feel more natural than the old one. You stop performing for approval and start acting out of alignment. You stop chasing perfection and start honoring progress. You stop defining yourself by your past and start building from the present. What's powerful is that this doesn't require anyone else's permission. You don't need a title or a raise or an award to tell a better story about yourself. You just need the courage to stop living in someone else's version of your limitations. And when you do that, when you remove even one lie, the ripple effects are enormous. You start to move differently, think differently, lead differently, not because someone told you to, but because your internal compass changed direction. This is what real growth looks like. It's not flashy, it's not always visible, but it's honest, it's internal, and it's lasting. That's what the next 90 days can be about. Not just new habits or better systems, but new truth. You can pick one belief that has kept you playing small, stuck, or afraid, and you can replace it with something stronger. Imagine how powerful that would be. Imagine the energy you'd get back from no longer carrying the weight of that lie. Imagine the relationships that would shift if you stopped showing up with shame and started showing up with clarity. Imagine the opportunities you'd say yes to if you stopped disqualifying yourself before you even tried. You don't need to become someone new to change your life. You just need to stop pretending you're someone you're not. Because beneath every limiting belief is a deeper truth trying to rise, a version of you that's always been there, bold, capable, resilient, just waiting for you to believe again. So ask yourself, what have I been repeating that's no longer true? And more importantly, what do I want to believe instead? Write it down, speak it often, and then build your days around it, not by trying to be perfect, not by proving anything to anyone, but by showing up every single day with integrity to the truth. And when the old lie tries to speak again, and it will, don't fight it with force. Replace it with evidence, with action, with a decision. Because every time you act in alignment with truth, you weaken the grip of fear. And in 90 days, you won't just think differently. You'll be different. Not because you changed overnight, but because you finally stopped living a story that was never yours to begin with. There's something powerful that happens when we shift from reacting to responding. Most people live in reaction, reacting to their environment, reacting to their emotions, reacting to pressure, to comparison, to fear. It's exhausting. And it's a dangerous place to live because in that state, we give up our power without even realizing it. But there's another way, one that doesn't just feel better, but leads to better outcomes. And it's what happens when we decide consciously, deliberately to live proactively, not based on what's happening to us, but on what we've chosen to stand for. So if you want to commit to something for 90 days that truly changes your life, commit to leading yourself daily. Not occasionally, not when it's easy, but consistently, especially when it's hard. We often associate leadership with roles, managers, CEOs, politicians. But leadership isn't a title. Leadership is a behavior. And before we ever lead anyone else, we must first learn to lead ourselves. That means creating clarity when everything feels foggy. That means making choices guided by principles instead of pressure. That means showing up with intention, not impulse. And none of that happens by accident. Leading yourself begins the moment you stop asking, what do I feel like doing today? And start asking, what matters most today and who do I need to be to live that? Most people wake up and reacting to the world before they've even remembered who they are. They get caught in the stream of noise, comparison, urgency. And then they wonder why they feel anxious, unfocused, behind. But leading yourself means taking ownership of the tone of your day, of the energy you bring into your relationships, of the mindset you walk into your work with. And if you want to do that consistently, you must design it intentionally. Think about it. If you don't lead yourself, the world will do it for you. And it will lead you toward burnout, distraction, and regret. This is why most people feel like they're drifting. They're doing things, yes, busy all the time, but they're not building anything that actually matters to them. Because they haven't clarified where they're going. They haven't paused long enough to ask, what does success look like for me? What am I willing to protect and what am I willing to release? When you lead yourself, you're no longer just surviving the day, you're shaping it. But that begins with one simple but profound shift, deciding that you are the architect of your time, not the victim of it. That your values aren't just concepts, they're priorities.